Well, good evening, everyone. For those who don't know me, my name is Les Ashton-Smith. Um, I'm a thematic collector, as you'd expect, and this particular presentation that I'm going to share with you today is about Alphonse Mucha, his life and his art. I will make a caveat right at the beginning. I apologize for any of my mispronunciation of Czech places and words. The Slav language is not my forte. Um, in terms of sources for this presentation, if you're interested in his art, there is a muchafoundation.org, obviously my stamp collection, and various other sources. People have asked me, well, why have you got a collection on Alphonse Mucha? The main reason is I just quite like the art. I visited his museum in Prague and discovered that he also designed stamps. So unfortunately, from that day on, I was hooked. So hopefully you'll enjoy some of the items as well. Alphonse Mucha, his full name was Alphonse Maria Mucha, was born in 1860 in Ivančice in Moravia, which was included into the formed country Czechoslovakia and is now part of the Czech Republic. His father was a court usher, and his mother was a governess. Apparently, he could learn to draw before he could walk, and his mother used to tie a necklace of crayons around his neck so that he could exercise his talent whenever he wanted. His love of drawing continued to develop during his childhood, but in his later childhood years, he actually focused on his talent for singing during his teenage years. Um, you can see there a map of the Czech Republic, just to give you some idea of where he was born. Age 12, he was given a choral scholarship from the Petrov Church to board at a secondary school in Brno. Um, Unfortunately, he was later expelled from this school, and his father then got him a job as a clerk in a local courtroom. And what I'm showing here is just some stamps to sort of set the scene. Um, there is a Czech stamp from 1963 of the anniversary of the Moravian Teachers Singing Club, and a local motif of the city or town of Brno from 1939. The image in the middle is a painting by Mucha. It's on a 1929 postcard, and this particular image was created in 1909. And it is actually of the church, and I've included a picture of the church so you can see the tower. It's a theme that Mucha was to come back to, and you'll see later on in the presentation some other examples. And I've also included another example of his artistry skills, taken when he was actually in Brno in the school of the choir boys. Right, let's have a look at his sort of early life and his artistic training. I put on a couple of anniversary miniature sheets there, and I'm sure you're beginning to recognize some of if you didn't already know Mucha's work, you're beginning to see images that you recognize. Uh, at 19, he was employed as a scenery painter in Vienna. And while he was there, he also enrolled in evening art classes. However, there was a catastrophic fire at the Ring Theatre in Vienna in 1881. It was a horrendous catastrophe, killing nearly 400 people. And Mucha's employer at the time obviously had to dismiss Mucha because there wasn't obviously a need for scenery painting. So he left and started trying to make a living by painting society portraits. He was noticed by a Count Balézy,
Des,
on.
I'm really sorry to interrupt, but we seem to have gone to your notes screen on the
Oh, right.
presentation
Okay.
rather than the actual slide.
Okay. Thank you. We're back. Is that working?
Yeah, that's better. Yeah, thanks.
Okay,
Sorry.
great. No problem at all. So he was noticed by this Count Belezi, who hired Mucha to paint the murals at his castle, and so impressed with the work from Mucha that he actually sponsored Mucha to study at the Munich Academy of Fine Arts. And this formal training was extended to carry on the studies in Paris in 1887. 1889, the sponsorship ended, but Mucha then looked to receive commissions from French and Czech publishers, and then began to work independently on advertising in magazines. In 1890, he was introduced to Madame Charlotte's Crèmerie, which was a collecting point for struggling artists. And this is where Mucha meets Paul Gauguin, amongst others. And here's a couple of examples. He was a contributor to a set of books, Contes d'Amour, which were very, very high quality educational books. And in fact, the picture on the right is from where Mucha is actually offering art classes. So you could actually apply to and go along and be taught by Mucha in his style. He also shared a studio with Paul Gauguin after he'd returned from his trip to Polynesia. So if you're familiar with Gauguin's work, and you'll know of his trips to Polynesia and his famous paintings of the Polynesian women. Also in 1893, he bought his own camera. Mucha bought a camera, and photography actually became a major part of his art. He often used it to prepare his artworks and take models and scenes, which he would later incorporate into his artwork. At this sort of time, although it wasn't known as such, Art Nouveau started to appear, and really between 1890 and 1910 throughout Europe, the United States. And particularly Art Nouveau is characterized by use of long, sort of sinuous organic lines. And it was employed in things like architecture, interior design, jewelry, and glass design, and various other things. But one of the main objectives and characteristics of Art Nouveau was to break down this traditional distinction of fine art being only painting and sculptures. And so it was widely used in many, many different sort of fields. It's worth just digressing to talk about a very famous actress, which really came to create the breakthrough for Mucha in Paris. Sarah Bernhardt was a French stage actress, and she was starred in some of the most popular French plays of the late 19th and earlier 20th century. She also played the male roles, including Shakespeare's Hamlet. Rostand called her the Queen of the Pose and the Princess of the Gesture, and Hugo praised her golden voice. She made many tours around the world, and she was one of the early prominent actresses to make sound recordings and actually act in the very, very early motion pictures. And in 1894, Mucha was actually his first contact with Sarah Bernhardt. He was commissioned to design a special Christmas and New Year supplement for Le Gauloise magazine, which actually included a feature on her work in Paris. There's a couple of stamps there. I've included one from France on a theatre collection in 2018, and one from Monaco in 1994 of her 150th birth anniversary. On December the 26th in 1894, he was actually Mucha was actually correcting proofs for a friend at Le Mercier's printing works, and Mucha is asked to undertake a last-minute commission, all the regular artists were on holiday, and Sarah Bernhardt required a new poster for her production of Gismonda, due to open just a week later. And Mucha designed this poster. It's the one shown on the right in the Mucha's 150th anniversary stamp booklet, with its long, sort of narrow style, its sort of subtle colours, the halo effect around the main subject. It marked a radical departure from the traditional poster design. It was an overnight sensation and announced this new artistic style and its creator to the citizens of Paris. The poster became so popular with the Parisian public that collectors used to bribe bill stickers to obtain them, or simply go out at night and using razors cut them down from the hoardings. Mucha portrayed Bernhardt as an exotic Byzantine noblewoman wearing this very splendid gown and orchid headdress. The costume was worn in the last act of the sort of climax of the play, and placing her life-size figure on an arch platform meant Mucha sort of characterized a sort of personality on stage. And this is one of the reasons why it became so popular. She was obviously delighted with the design, and she continued to use the same poster throughout her American tour in 1896. What you also see there is a charity stamp, which I quite like, from France in 45, which shows a portrait of Sarah Bernhardt. Sarah Bernhardt actually buys extra posters whenever Mucha designs the next poster for the next theatre production, and she then sells them to admirers. So maybe it was a first use or early use of the celebrity souvenir, perhaps. Sarah signed a 6-year contract with Mucha, who is now responsible for designing all the posters, all the stage sets, and all the costumes for the leading actress of Paris. Here is a miniature sheet from Micronesia in 2013, showing Sarah Bernhardt in some of her different roles, all drawn by Mucha. Mucha then joins La Plume, which is an independent sort of magazine which displays work of avant-garde artists, and the Salon de Cent, where they were holding regular exhibitions. And in fact, Mucha designed the poster for the 20th event, which is the stamp you see on the left-hand side. There's a stamp from Guinea, which was the image was actually reproduced on a prepaid postcard from the Czech Republic in 2015. In 1896, he was employed by Champenois, who were one of the most important printers of the age, and he was commissioned to create some decorative panels on the seasons. And you can see there the first edition from Somalia of the first time he employed this season style. This sort of theme became so popular, he was asked to produce more sets, and we'll see some later sets later on in the presentation. Still the same year, he was commissioned for a poster advertising the Job cigarette paper. And this is an image which is quite a famous image, which you will see in, certainly if you ever go to Paris, you'll see it on postcards and various other things. He had various commissions for calendars, posters, cards, and packaging. And to the right is a very interesting, or I quite like it, and produced by the Austrian Post Office. It's part of their art collection, and it's like a personalized sheet of stamps, all for use within Austria. But it's a whole multitude of some of Mucha's paintings. It doesn't do it justice on the screen to the actual sheet. Other famous paintings that he created, there's a Byzantine brunette, which is the Czech Republic used in 2000, and a set of famous painting stamps. 1896, Austria. He produced the zodiac image, and Austria used it in 2010, and the 150th anniversary of his birth. In 1900, there was a World Fair in Paris, and he had various pictures, designs, posters, jewelry, and fabrics, and even rug designs being exhibited at the fair. And another example is the Princess Hyacinth, which is the on the Czechoslovakian stamp in 1968, which was an advertising poster for a ballet. And then the four stamps at the bottom, these are arts, painting, music, and dance from Czechoslovakia in 1969. And these were titled Precious Stones, so there were ruby, amethyst, women, and art, all paintings by Mucha. Another very famous poster that Mucha designed for Monte Carlo, and this was issued in Monaco, put it on a stamp in 2003, and here's a sort of mini sheet of the stamps. They're very attractive, I think, with lots of interesting additions to the gutters around the sheet. In 1899, Mucha published Le Pater, which was an illustrated edition of the Lord's Prayer, embellished in his sinuous, faintly occult style. They only made 510 copies, 390 in French and 120 in Czech, copies of the book. However, Mucha considered these his printed masterwork. So they obviously again, you can see that his sort of style is developing through his work and through his commissions. Mucha actually visited America 5 times in 6 years because he had a passion to write, to create a Slav epic. He was very concerned that the history of the Slavs was not being recorded, and he had his grand-eyed plan of producing a set of paintings which would actually describe the trials and tribulations of the Slav nation. He went to America to seek funds for this particular project, and he went several times. He was commissioned to various places, but he actually met the Crane family, met Woodrow Wilson, and started painting for influential Americans. He also got married to Mariska in 1906. And in fact, you can see the Madonna of the Lilies, which is an interesting painting, which was actually, he was commissioned to decorate a church in Jerusalem. But for some reason, the project was cancelled, but the preparation painting still exists, and the South African Republic used it in 2014 on a little miniature sheet. And here's some examples. After seeking patrons and sponsors, you can see some of his work. In the picture on the left is Josephine Crane, who was the daughter of the Crane, the sponsor he was courting, if it were, and he actually painted Josephine as the Slav goddess Slavia. At the same following year, his daughter was born, Yaroslava, and in 1909 he actually paints the famous American actress Maud Adams in her role in Joan of Arc. He also designed the costumes and sets for a spectacular one-night gala. So he was beginning to be recognized in America as an artist, and starting to build his sort of sponsorship portfolio to enable him to do his Slav epic. In 1909, he was also asked to decorate some buildings in Prague, which we'll come to see. So he came back to Bohemia. Here's a couple of the seasons we were talking about earlier. There's two examples there from Micronesia. The top one is the seasons. It's repeated in calendars and other printings. And the bottom one is the moon and stars. Again, images I'm sure some of you will recognize. You will see them in calendars and various other imagery. So he came to work in Žibrov Castle with his family, and here's a first day cover and stamp of the municipal house in Prague, in which he designed interiors and murals celebrating the heroic Czech people. He also begins to start his first preparation sketches for his grand Slav epic. Here's another example of some of the work from Mucha in unusual locations. This is a beautiful Art Nouveau Thermia Palace. It was the first sort of 5-star spa and wellness hotel in Slovakia, which was opened in 1912, and it became one of the most exclusive and best health spas in Europe. And inside the grand restaurant, there's a beautiful painting by Alphonse Mucha. You can see it in the little image across and Slovakia actually issued a very nice miniature sheet with shaped top showing that artwork. And we come back to the, if you remember, the church tower that we saw earlier on in the presentation. This was a poster that he designed for free for his city of his birth, Ivančice, in 1912. It was a regional fair. There's a poster stamp there. There are several. I think there's at least 6 of these poster stamps in different colours. They're quite difficult to get hold of, but they're quite nice. And there was a sort of poster, and there's an example of the poster, and there are some other poster stamps at the bottom. Unfortunately, the exhibition actually never took place, but that image of the church and the steeple and the swallows flying around it, it's obviously something which was very, very important to Mucha in his design and his work. So this is the first of the big canvases that Mucha started working on, the Slav epic. It's a huge piece. We'll talk about some of you may have seen them. These are huge paintings. We're talking about sort of 30 by 30 feet. So very, very 10 by 10 meters, all sort of explaining the story of the Slav nation. Detail from the first of these paintings is actually the Czechoslovakia used in 1990, and as you can see on the right of the screen at the moment. Here's some more examples of some of the Slav epic paintings that he was creating at this sort of time. In 1916, he created and completed numbers 7, 8, and 9 in the set, and you can see some of them on these miniature sheets from Mozambique and Togo. At the same time, his son was born, Jiri, in 1915, about the same sort of time. And this is what actually first introduced me to Mucha, or got me into collecting stamps on the theme of Alphonse Mucha. Czechoslovakia was obviously created after the First World War. They needed stamps, so they first stamps, and they asked Mucha to design them. They're known as the Hradčany issue or castle stamps. There are 5 types. Obviously, at the time, the new Czechoslovakian government engaged a firm that never produced stamps. So neither the printing company nor the new government had any experience. So this sort of inexperience gave problems with paper, inks, regularly repairing and replacing the plates. And so there's a whole range of variations for the alert collection. And you can see here the 5 major types of stamps with variations on where the Czech and Czechoslovakia is in terms of the picture, and various sort of admissions of items within the stamp. One of the sort of famous in the area of this is what they call the printer's waste. And you will find stamps, Mucha stamps, overprinted several times, sometimes in different orientations. There is a school of thought that said that this printer's waste was actually created by the philatelic societies in Prague as a way of generating variation and items, but I couldn't possibly comment on that. But they are fairly easy to find if you want to look for them. What is more unusual is the bisect that I show. I have never seen another one of these. I actually did this presentation to the Czech Society a few months ago and actually asked the question, has anyone else ever seen a bisect? So I'm not sure if this is official use. It looks as though it is. It's been postmarked correctly. It's quite well separated, but nevertheless, I'm quite pleased to have it in my collection. And the castle appears also in postal stationery, letter cards. It was also overprinted. I show as a complete aside his 3 castle variants. If you've got them spare in your collection, I'd quite like them. These are the only 3 I don't have in my sort of standard collection. I'm not an expert Czechoslovakia collector, but unfortunately these 3 seem to be the most expensive. Who would guess that? He also designed the banknotes for the country. The 10 krona note in 27 actually features his daughter as the lady. But again, you can see this very much this Art Nouveau, sinuous nature type style that he used. He used his model. He used his daughter as a model for many of his paintings and various commissions that he did. In 1922, he actually designed the coat of arms for the Czechoslovakia. It was in use until 1961. And in fact, in 1922, they issued a set of 6 stamps called the coat of arms set. And here's an example of the stamps and a postcard with 3 of them in postally used. And here's some examples of some of the stamps he produced and some of the overprints. There were some here for newspaper use, postage dues, one being overprinted for the Red Cross, and two examples shown for use in Eastern Silesia, the SO, which was a plebiscite as a result of the negotiations at the end of World War One. Quite an interesting stamp issue was the Hussite priest. It was going to be a single issue, but it was finally issued as 2 stamps, the 80 Helleru and the 90 Helleru. Huss was deemed a heretic by the Catholic Church and he was burned at the stake in 1415. His Mucha's stamp design was opposed by the Czech Catholics, who were able to influence the Ministry of Posts and Telecommunications into only supplying a limited number of post offices throughout the country. So the stamps would actually only remain valid for about 10 months. Prague did have quite a stock of them, was still issuing them, but it's very, very rare to find them on cover. On the top right is quite an unusual one, which I have, which is it's recorded in Michel of actually a reverse image. It's where the the paper. It's obviously somehow the image has become reversed or transferred, perhaps from wet ink on a page. I'm not sure, but that's quite a nice. Mucha did actually design another stamp per issue, and you can see that on the postal stationery card from 1968. That stamp design obviously progressed almost through to use, but because of the Hussite priest and the reaction from the sort of establishment against Mucha, probably prevented this stamp ever being used, which is quite unfortunate because I quite like the design of the stamp. But as I said, it never became a stamp, but was used on a postal stationery card some years later. Another quite famous Mucha image, and really quite a moving issue, was after the collapse of the Russian government to the Soviets in 1922. Russia was obviously falls victim to the civil war and a crippling economic situation. So there was widespread casualty of war and also widespread disease and starvation. And Mucha actually designed this poster to call upon Western countries to send shipments of food and grain. And Russian restituenda is Russia must recover. And this particular image, very haunting image, is quite a famous image done by Mucha. In 1919, 1920, 21, the first sort of 5 canvases from the big Slav epic were taken to Chicago and then to Brooklyn Museum in New York. And this is an image of the exhibition poster. It was a highly successful exhibition, had 600,000 visitors to see these images, and really again cemented Mucha's reputation in America and Europe and America. The other thing that I discovered in my research that Mucha was a famous Freemason, and this was actually recorded on a miniature sheet from Gabon in 2021. And you can see its famous French Freemasons on the sheet there. In 1931, he was commissioned by the Slavia Bank to design a stained glass window for the Prague Cathedral St. Vitus. And excuse me. And this is a beautiful stained glass window in the main sort of castle complex in Prague. In 32, he moved back to France for 2 years. And in 1934, he was made an officer to the Legion of Honor. In 1937, unfortunately, he caught pneumonia quite badly. However, he did recover, but I'm sure he was weaker after this illness. In 39, of course, history reminds us the German army marched into Prague. Mucha was actually arrested and he was interrogated for several days, but then he was released. But unfortunately, I think having been made weaker by pneumonia and then being interrogated for several days, it wasn't long later in 39, 10 days short of his 79th birthday, he died of pneumonia just over a month before the outbreak of World War II. He's buried in the Vyšehrad Cemetery in Prague, which is the final resting place for many composers, artists. So let's just remind ourselves a little bit about his legacy. Pioneer of the Art Nouveau, he's often described as the father, or certainly one of the pioneers of Art Nouveau. Other artists in that sort of category would include Klimt or Toulouse-Lautrec. It's worth contrasting with Art Deco because many people get the two forms confused. I mean, Art Deco is more zigzag chevrons, upside down V's. It's more industrial and uses sort of sharp edges, whereas Art Nouveau is much more sinuous with curves of plants and flowers. And here's some examples from different, excuse me, from different parts of the world. The other thing about Art Nouveau is it's not confined to paintings and sculpture. It was used for posters, interior designs, calendars, advertising, jewelry. Mucha designed jewelry for Fouquet, who was a very, very famous jeweler of the time. Also photography. Mucha actually pioneered early nude photography, and he certainly used pictures for his research and preparation for the Slav epic paintings. And you can see some examples of some of the early photographs, which you can later see were moved into final paintings. Certainly the culture and identity of Czechoslovakia is certainly can be linked to Mucha. His designs are regularly used for stamps issued for anniversaries of the country and for stamp day issue type things. Here's some examples from 1948 of a miniature sheet and postal stationery, both showing the castle stamp. In 1958 and in 1960, again, examples. One was the anniversary of Mucha's birth, a portrait of engraving of Alphonse Mucha. The one on the left is quite nice, which is a garland woman representing the Republic looking at the first stamp, and you can see a picture of the castle stamp on the wall there. I like them. They're both, I think, fine examples of the engraver's art of the time. Other examples, 50th anniversary in 1968, a rather nice imperf sheet there with a representative of the castle stamp. Stamp Day 68, again, you can see the castle stamp being used, stamp on stamp, 78, and in 88, examples of the castle stamp being used again and again. In 1995, the Czech Republic now that Czech and Slovakia have separated, it was a stamp issued on stamp printing, and it actually shows Mucha's dove stamp on the stamp, which is quite nice. Czech culture in France, the miniature sheet on the right, it's actually showing Rodin and Mucha in a carriage in a Prague carriage in 1902. In 2018 for Prague, a major philatelic exhibition. Again, these are non-value indicating stamps, A-class postage. This was rather nice miniature sheet issued with the various Mucha dove stamp and the castle stamps. The 100th anniversary of the Czech nation in 2018 was quite a nice stamp. It actually showed stamps from the very early days right through to the modern day, and you can actually pick out some of the Mucha stamps in the lineup. A big miniature sheet here for the Czech Republic in 2018. If you look in the background, slightly to the left of King Wenceslas, who's on the main stamp in the middle, you can see an image of the castle in the background of the stamp. I like these particularly interesting because it was again for Prague 88, and other countries actually used the Mucha stamp on their stamp. So there's examples there from Cuba and from Bulgaria, and a private issue from the Netherlands in 88, again all showing the Mucha's original first stamp for Czechoslovakia on them. And then in the bottom right is a stamp day from Slovakia, and again using the castle stamp, and in fact this time with a portrait of Mucha in the stamp. As you can imagine, I'm looking through Czech and Czechoslovakian stamps for this castle, and this was a World Stamp Exhibition 2018, which was the 100th anniversary of the Postal Museum in the Czech Republic. And if you look in the courtyard of the castle, in the background, you can see the image of the castle stamp in terms of doing there. So in summary, Alphonse Mucha, he was the pioneer of Art Nouveau. He was multidisciplined in his work and medium, again, a characteristic of Art Nouveau. He certainly can be credited for creating the identity of Czechoslovakia in terms of stamps, coat of arms, money, and then he spent 18 years researching and painting his Slav epic. Which is a major piece of work, 30 canvases. Whenever you get a chance to go to Prague to see it, they are truly amazing in their sheer scale of what they show. So that is the end of my presentation. Thank you very much for listening. And if you have any questions, I'll do my very best to answer them. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Les. That really was very, very good. I really enjoyed that. A couple of things I particularly liked was the fact that he covered so many things, not just stamps, poster stamps and jewelry. The list was almost endless. Tremendous work, and so exciting, so much fun in it all. I particularly liked the Monaco mini sheet with all the famous posters on. I thought that was really absolutely superb. And I reckon if you can wangle your children into some of your designs, i.e. the banknote in his case, I think it's almost an indication that you've made it. If you can do that sort of thing and get away with it. One small question from me. I know there's a few people want to ask you questions. The stained glass window. Do you have any idea what sort of size that was? They come in obviously all sorts of different sizes, but
it's big.
It was big.
It's a very big window.
Yeah. Yes, you don't surprise me.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of being rather more technical than it's got to be. We're talking meters high. I only found out about it actually quite late in my collecting here. I'd been to St. Vitus Cathedral in Prague and sort of just said, and I do like stained glass windows, and it looks quite a modern, even though of course it's in the early 19th century. But nevertheless, it is a major window.
Yeah. Okay. There was one question earlier on from somebody. Do you know why he was expelled from school?
I don't. I'm perfectly honest. I don't think he was particularly academic. I mean, there's no evidence to suggest he obviously wasn't illiterate or anything like that. But he certainly was a prolific artist, and I suspect his academic studies probably suffered because of that. I mean, he in his early life he went to a church and saw a local artist, and he vowed then that he could make money out of his art, as opposed to presumably his father wishing him to join, say, in the family business as a court usher, but certainly the sort of lower echelons of the civil service of the time. But
yeah, I think
no, I don't know.
I think he called that correctly. I think.
Yes, yeah, maybe so.
Okay. Any questions? I think I saw a hand go somewhere, but I've lost them. Any questions from anybody? No, I can't see anything. No. Okay then. That really was very exciting, Les. I really enjoyed it, and the man's work is tremendous. Did he ever come to the UK at all, as far as you know?
I've no evidence of him coming to the UK. I mean, his work is obviously is visible in lots of different products, and at the time, the advertising, your cats and cigarette papers, calendars, notebooks. Some of his early sort of imagery in France, some of the early postcards. In fact, they're incredibly expensive and very, very valuable, rare things to collect. I've looked at trying to get some of them, and normally way beyond my means. So he was, doing making a living, doing his work all over the place. So I can't think that he would have not have somehow had an influence in the UK. I'm just not sure he ever came here.
Okay. Okay, last chance. If anybody wants to ask a question, no. Okay. Well, can we show our appreciation in the usual manner, please? Thank you very much, Liz.
Thank you.
Bev.